Welcome students, Dr. Mike here for CIS-2640 Network Security, or I like to call it Security Plus class. And this is a coverage or a summary of Chapter 1, Introduction to Security. And we can see here is a great Kaspersky cyber map of all the current threats that are currently happening, supposedly. Looks great, definitely has a cool Mr. Robot vibe to it, I know in some ways, but and it is true, it's live stuff, it's a lot of network activity, so you can see network is definitely an important part of security, and we're definitely going to talk about network a lot. And you're going to do a lot of network activity. So there are other aspects, though, of security beyond just the network, and we'll talk about those here in Chapter 1, in Introduction to Security. So in case this is only a summary of the slide deck. I don't have the entire slide deck loaded. You can get the slide deck in your shell for your course, but we are just looking at Introduction to Security, Chapter 1, and briefly cover NetLab 1. But in any case, let's talk about security. What it really comes down to. So really, we're going to talk about explaining security, types of attacks, which you'll learn throughout the course, principles of defense, and so on. So again, this slide deck might be a little old, but these are some general attacks we know about. And it's not just servers being hacked or companies. We see things like cars, car tampering, aircraft systems. We've seen Yahoo accounts compromised by attackers very easily, actually. We'll talk about that in one of the examples. Voting machine tampering, definitely one. A lot of stuff from DEF CON about voting machine village activity. Just all kinds of attacks. So there's definitely a huge source of attacks you can read about. And I know the chapter in the textbook has a lot of different information about attacks, so I won't go over that. Definitely thumb through those. Threat Post is a really good resource. So I'll use Threat Post a lot sometimes. Good way to see current vulnerabilities and so on, current topics. So this could be very handy for the class. And just in general, you do what I do. I'll follow an RSS feed a lot of times. Yes, go to RSS feeds or Twitter. If you're on social media, you can definitely follow Twitter or Facebook and keep up with what's going on. And an important thing is, as we look at security and we look at threats during this course, is to understand the root or the cause of it, the attack, and also the details. Sometimes you'll see stories posted about all iOS devices, all Wi-Fi devices. This was actually a couple years ago. All Wi-Fi is capable of being hacked. It was on the news. But we looked deeper down into it. It was a very, very detailed attack. Somebody to have root access to a router and do a very sophisticated change out. And the story is actually rooted around a security researcher who found the attack and didn't disclose it, but disclosed it to Wi-Fi major, Microsoft, Apple, for updates to both devices, and router manufacturers update the Wi-Fi stack of how it handles the key exchange. So in case, so the news would take something and say, oh, everything's hackable. In a way it is, but in the case of that story, yeah, it was found by a researcher, disclosed properly, and so on. So again, as we go through the course and you analyze any articles about current or even previous attacks, look at it with a real grain eye and see about the attack itself, see what it needed. So, but a lot of areas come up, and there are a lot of areas, a lot of things, actions that cause attacks. I say attack, we say hacking. Side note, hacking in general to me is more than just attack. You can hack together a really cool system with some Raspberry Pis to make a cool router, a home server. You might take apart maybe a tablet, hack it, make it something a little better. You might hack the OS and add your own stuff to it. So hacking to me is more a mentality, where the attack is really the sort of leveraging that mentality, but in a malicious way. So, but in any case, reasons why connected devices, delays in updating. This is definitely a big one. Delays in updating is huge, and we've seen that with Equifax. So with their stack, it was not updated correctly, a middleware stack. So um, weak security update distributions, distributed attacks, and so on. Personal devices is a big one, and user confusion. If you make something hard to secure, it's not going to be secure. So complexity and security definitely go hand in hand. So again, understanding security is very important. What's the goal of security? Free from danger, right? Talk about in general. And what we talk about in general here is, what are we looking at? We're looking at risk. So that is really the underlying thing. We need to manage risk. So risk management, and that's the most exciting thing I might think about when it comes to cybersecurity. It is a cornerstone of that. Very important that we understand you can only manage so much risk. So there will be some, no matter what. Nothing is 100% secure. I do like this figure 1.3 from the textbook. It does talk about some of the areas, policies and procedures, people and products. And in the center here, you'll see a very important concept. So from risk here, we have CIA, not the CIA you're thinking about, not the three-letter agency out in Virginia, right? It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So integrity of the information, source confidentiality. Can we keep it confidential? Only those who need to see it can. Integrity is the information we have correct? Has it been altered in any way? Can we audit that? Can we ensure that when you download an app from the App Store, the integrity of the app has not been compromised? Can we ways we can ensure that? Availability. If I need data and or access, can I get that? So we look at risk as it applies to all these areas. Underlying this, of course, pushing behind this is, of course, we have products, people, and policy and procedures. They sort of uphold a way to manage the risk. Policy procedures, not the most exciting, but if you can't either create a simple password policy for a company and make sure it's distributed correctly and also monitored correctly and enforced, definitely a big one. You got to make sure you can do that. And again, and I've done myself. I've been a new InfoSec analyst years ago. You had to write database security procedures. So during the course, we'll look at ways you can go out and find existing things you can pull from. You don't have to create from a blank slate. And we'll see later in the course, there's a lot of assets, and I will try to bring those into the course. For example, things like OWASP Top 10. We're definitely going to talk about this a lot. SANS, there's a lot of information here. Of course, we talked about threat posts already. And of course, national bulletins, CVEs, things like that. You got to be able to handle a lot of data. So it's going to help you in writing a good procedure. In fact, you'll have a security policy lab during this course. So people, just that, right? Good old carbon-based life forms. We're the weakest link. I mean, usually when it comes down to an issue of security misconfiguration, it's because someone missed it, or there was a policy or procedure that was missing, that was not created by somebody. So really, we are the central source. I mean, because we are hacks coming in here. So, and of course, products. Products themselves, this can have a lot of areas here. This could be everything from software, configuration management software. It could be process management. It could be actual security products. It could be hardware, firewalls, things like that. So this is a huge category. I look at also managing products as part of this, of how we take those people, take those procedures, and manage our products that we use to run our business. So an important point about the people here, this people portion here, I keep pointing to it on my little whiteboard. So security itself, let's come to the classic in this. is a unique part of IT, information technology, in where is the only aspect where we have a human adversary. So we have the black hat hacker, trying best to school black hat out there, who's trying to enact in some way on these three pillars. Of course, if we want to know more, there's of APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, APT groups, and nation states, and so on. But we think like the attacker. That's what comes down to this course too. Is I know we're going to talk about procedures and policies, and yes, we're going to talk about corporate level stuff, but in a lot of ways too, you got to think like the attacker. So you will learn the tools the attacker uses. You don't use these tools, turn them on yourself per se, right? And this is called penetration testing, or security auditing, or security testing. It's got a lot of different names. So some of those products themselves are actually open source, and you will be exposed to those during the class. So you got to think like the attacker. You got to think maliciously, even though you got to be business-minded. All right. So some terminology, of course, most of the stuff here, a threat and asset. An asset, of course, asset is we'll see during risk management, is a major portion of risk management is our asset. So this could be of anything. This could be a building. This could be data, a database, customer information. It could be software we control, our product. Our assets could be things that have us on the web that give us our availability. So a threat itself, so then cause harm to our asset. And not everything is a person. We have Mother Nature. You can have that asset could be from fire, flood, and also the asset itself just dying. Hard drives have a limited space, a limited lifetime. You know, the hard drives will die. So as we look at threats, we think about the threat actor, not just the person. A lot of times we'll look at this, but also think about just in general the threats in general. So of not just being a person, but the threat actor. As soon as it comes across as a threat vector. So this is a pretty good table here from the chapter. You can see an asset, database. The threat could be a stolen database. And later in the course, we look at risk assessment. You're going to see how this comes together. What's the threat actor? And again, this is nice, the table shows an attacker, but also hurricane, fire, flood, power loss. What's the vulnerability? What's specifically the thing? Well, you know, is it a certain defect in software? Is it a unpatched middleware, like Struts framework? Going back to thinking about our Equifax. And how can the vector access that? Can the attacker, inject into our framework a specific piece of code that will allow access? And likelihood. What's the risk of possibilities of happening? And it comes down to risk again. The risk, it boils down to risk, because you'll have to go through when we look at risk assessment, you'll see you have to go through at the end of the day and figure out what's the most valuable asset we have, what's the highest risk to it, and how can we mitigate it? Again, that's a little more risk assessment, but you need to be thinking in that term when you go through doing cybersecurity work, because you can't protect everything under limited time and budget. And unfortunately, I've actually run into upper level management that just doesn't have money for protecting everything. And a lot of times they'll just be like, oh, well, what's the fine if we get hacked? Because we don't have the money to pay to update everything. And so it is a risk. It is a game of risk, and you'll definitely be in part of it. So, but there are things that will help government agencies and corporations deal with consequences of not protecting themselves. Unfortunately, data breaches are always happening. There are some fines, though. We're seeing some in action. But there are things like HIPAA, for example, PCI for payment card industry, Sarbanes-Oxley. These different things that are out there. Two big ones, of course, HIPAA for healthcare. And if you work anywhere in healthcare and cybersecurity, you definitely want to understand HIPAA and how it comes into play. PCI. A lot of companies, of course, just use like PayPal. They don't want to build their own payment system, or use Square, for example. Just use something push that risk off to someone else, we'll let them assume all the work takes to be PCI compliant. So those are out there. Those legal consequences for not having those adhered to those policies. So there's some table here, cost of the attack. Actually, I'd like to take a moment of this table here and talk about just general software, hardware, data, database development, software development, even an entire data service, development, even cloud development, anything you develop into, whether hardware, software, and time and money here. I know it shows the cost of attack. I like to flip this table and say the cost of not securing it. The cost of something to build in security early is cheaper than having to go back and either one, pay for this attack because of the loss of the data, either because of fines from these, and or the cost of re-engineering an existing system is way more than building security in early. So I like to sort of think of that when you look at this chapter as you go through the course. It's not easy always to do this. I've experienced it myself from software development. It's just, there's only so much money to build our website. So again, this is why you get to think about, well, I need just a little bit to secure the most riskiest areas. SQL injection, cross-site scripting per se. I can let you secure that, and I have certain tools, and I need a certain amount of time and money to do that. So being able to play well within the whole development process, whether it be developing a data center, physical security, and virtual security and cyber security, or just software security, be able to play well in that game of money is going to make you a really great cybersecurity analyst or engineer in the long run. So at first I come in like, well, it's all insecure. We got to be able to secure all of it, and a lot of it's going to be, well, we don't have the money, time. And you step back and look back, yeah, that's true. I see that. So how can I help someone get through this? So cybercrime itself also comes into play. You see later in the course, forensics is sort of a part of this. There is a whole other course for forensics, and of course it has an actual branch, usually based around criminal activity, but it does also have corporate things. The idea being, if you were hacked, what are you going to do to make sure you can not get hacked again? So having incident response plans in place, things like that. And actually, we'll look at, there's a lab for that later in the course. So threat actors. Talked about those before. That's the black hats. They have everything, different funding resources. It could be a person, let's say you're a script kiddie. The term script kiddie, it has a really bad connotation. I guess in the very end, think of a script kiddie being this threat actor, being someone who just found your website and is just running tools against it, not knowing what the tools are. But don't discount the power of automated tools. On the flip side, that mentality to understand how a tool works is definitely important, but to be able to efficiently run it is a very valuable asset if you're going to defend yourself. So, but yeah, script kiddie, of course, definitely no skill, low or no skill required. They just find a tool online and point at your website and run it. These aren't really smart. Something does happen. They're not using a VPN, and it can be traced back to their IP address, things like that. So, but defense. So how do we defend this? Pretty important. Layering is really important. So in the end here, we have our asset. And we'll say our asset is a database. So usually data is actually the asset, but it can be many things. It can be, again, it can be physical and so on. How can we defend this? So we did different layers of security. We don't have one product and one specific type of security. We have physical security, of course, access control. Physical access control here, who can go in and out of the data center. And we might have then a layer for software security. We want to make sure that the database software is updated, as well as the operating systems in our system itself. I don't think of operating systems, our app, and import our middleware, things like Struts framework, Java, any kind of frameworks, code security, things like that. And of course, we have our network security, definitely a very important one. Our asset has to be able to reach the outside world all through this. Definitely want to make sure our network is up to par. And network security can also drive down deeper into this too. It's not just, I'm just going to take this ring and make it different layers itself. We have network edge security, things like our DMZ, an area for public-facing servers. It's if isolation too. We keep isolation within our network, as well as same with software too. This sort of bleeds up in here, right? We make sure our network software is patched correctly. You'll see a lot of threats for like Cisco devices, things like that. So we wanted to use network isolation for subnets. An example of this would be our Target attack from years ago. Target did not have proper isolation between two subnets. One would be in their payment system and their HVAC. Both were under the same subnet. And payment system, of course, had access to the most valuable data. HVAC had access to another ring of data, or maybe another asset, but not the most valuable, not what we're targeting. It itself was HVAC data. And of course, someone came in through the HVAC vendor and hacked through the vendor and got into the payment system. So you can see where network isolation definitely was important here. It was a missing component of that. So obscurity is not really a good, here on the slide, security through obscurity is not good. It could sort of come into play a little bit. So our network layer here, let's look at this. We have a Wi-Fi layer. And we have it for our office, our physical office. That's a horrible looking Wi-Fi. Our Wi-Fi access for visitors. Maybe we have a visitor one that does publicly show an SSID, but our internal one, we don't publicly post the SSID. And we'll learn what those are later in the course. But we want our visitors to be able to connect to a special isolated network that only has specific access to certain, let's say, certain ports, like maybe 80 and 443. Maybe it's authenticated. Maybe it's only a time limit. We want to control that access, so we publish that. But our internal Wi-Fi, we don't publish. It does obscure the fact that we're not going to publish our SSID for our regular internal Wi-Fi network. But it doesn't mean there's tools out there. Someone who with a little bit of ability, easy, even mobile apps can find those tools. So that's not really security. It's something you would add to the layer. Again, we might add some obscurity inside here by not posting our SSID for our internal network. It's supposed to be a D, but that's not the limit of our security. It should definitely have, again, hardened access. Maybe we sync up with our network access and so on. Simplicity, very important. This could be simplicity for our end users. Our security does not just end here at the network edge. Our end users might have on their web browser access to our system, and it's their data in a way, or our data they interact with. It could be our cell. It could be like an Amazon web store, right? AWS, web services. It could be a bookseller, whatever you want to call it. How they interact, how our end users interact with our system. And it can be through a web browser, it could be through an operating system, it could be through an app on our phone. If we make security complex, or we default to insecure, that's going to lead to some bad things, because unbeknownst to them, they could be hacked, and someone can get on and find that access to their app allows them access into our system, right? They become a conduit, even unbeknownst to them. And I mean by called the bane of default, the default of unsecure is horrible. An example of that was way back in the day. I think it was Windows 98. Yeah, Windows 98 back in the day had a firewall, but it's off by default. Well, maybe before you're watching this, of course, you're coming, well, yeah, if I get an OS, I'm going to check my firewall, my updates. But think about people you might know who have no idea what a firewall is, what an OS update is, what an app update is. And if we leave things insecure by default, a lot of our population of end users will use it that way, again, and then become a victim, which in turn can make us victims too. So we need to think about simplicity for a lot of reasons. And that should ends up chapter 1. If we look at the rest of the textbook again, there's some good stuff here in the textbook. Attack tools. So this leads us back to our week 1 NetLab, which is going to be, I'll just grab this here, it's going to be this Lab 1, network devices and capturing network traffic. So this lab itself is going to give you some access and log it into some of the tools you'll see in the chapter, one of those being Kali Linux. You've been there a lot during this course. So, and attack tools are very important because not just for the attacker, again, think like the attacker. I need to have access to those tools to understand and either do my own pen testing, whether I do it or contract pen testers. Understanding your attack tools is very important. So again, go through the chapter. I think I covered most of the stuff I want to talk about. There's some good stuff at the beginning of the chapter. I have some examples of hacks, some more details here about like the Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, HIPAA, a little more information about those. Cyber terrorism, again, threat actors, nation state actors. So again, we have different, there you go, fundamentals of security principles. There you go. This is a little deeper description from what I had. So again, look at this stuff. It should definitely help you out in understanding frameworks. Understand frameworks and architectures. That's important too. I say frameworks, it could be anything, right? Architectures, operating systems, the apps that run on them, services, web servers, email servers, and also the libraries they use, and the architectures, the middleware they use, things like that. There's a lot of stuff, more than just our code and our operating system. There's a lot of stuff in between we're going to look at during this course. So the NetLab, again, for this NetLab, again, you're going to dig in, and you are going to capture some traffic with TCP dump, and use Wireshark to analyze it. Very common security tool, Wireshark, fantastic tool. I can't say enough about it. It's one of the primary tools you use, not just for maybe pen testing or checking out your own traffic, make sure there's no insecure traffic going back and forth. Great way to look for that. You can filter for insecure protocols. I've used it for mobile app pen testing, where I've put Wireshark actually on this Mac, create a Wi-Fi hotspot in this, take a test device, that is my personal one, but I test Android and test iPhone sent to me with the app running, and using this as a hotspot, piping the entire hotspot through Wireshark. And I can capture and have evidence of logging in and doing a search and those critical functions that the app had, and I can verify that itself did not have any insecure traffic. So very powerful tool. Barely scratch the surface on it. Definitely look at the Wireshark website, but you will go through and make sure you understand how to use NetLab, so get you time to work on that too. So that's it for Introduction to Security, and I look forward to seeing you progress, and we'll see you again for future topics. Thank you.